It's time for EdTech Mondays, brought to you by MasterCard Foundation and CC Hub.
Welcome to another episode of the EdTech Mondays Nigeria show, a platform that facilitates critical conversations on the use of technology for teaching and learning in Nigeria. I am Chinyelu Akpa, your host as always on this show, and it's great to be back here this brand new month of June. This month, we will be discussing something very interesting and important: technology for accessible and inclusive education. Despite the growth of education technology across Africa, many learners, especially those from marginalized backgrounds and children with special education needs, still face barriers to quality and personalized education. These include learners with disabilities, children in remote or low-income communities, girls facing socio-cultural constraints, and students who require alternative learning pathways. This month's conversation explores how technology can be better designed, distributed, and deployed to support equitable access and meet diverse learning needs. How can EdTech be leveraged to cater to the unique learning preferences, styles, and needs of learners in Nigeria? Laying the foundation on this first episode, we are defining what inclusive and accessible education means in the EdTech space. And we'll be mapping out the groups often excluded in EdTech design and deployment. This might challenge conventional definitions of inclusion. So buckle up, because we promise to have a very, very thought-provoking conversation this month. On the show today, I am joined by Babatunde Von, who is a digital transformation leader with 16 years of experience at the intersection of technology, education, and social impact. He is the founder of YMADC, a youth-focused NGO, and a former Microsoft leader who trained over 45,000 teachers across Africa. He's a published author and certified professional on inclusive EdTech, workforce readiness, and AI-driven education, with a focus on contextualized solutions for emerging markets. Join me as I welcome today Babatunde Von. Hello, Babatunde. It's great to have you here.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So I know that I've done a good work, on the introductory bits of this show. So let's jump right in. The word inclusive education, right, is so easily tossed around, right, in I'd say the creative, and I mean the creative space, and I mean the EdTech creative space, and even generally in education. But when we say inclusive education, and looking at the context of EdTech, what does this truly mean?
Thank you so much. I believe that inclusive EdTech has to do with designing solutions that help us to remove learning barriers for people, whether they have some kind of geographical challenge, maybe they are marginalized, regardless of their age, regardless of their gender. So regardless of any kind of socio-economic constraint that they might have, inclusive EdTech means that we are designing learning solutions that help us to delete, I like to use the word delete, to bring those barriers into non-existence.
You've just touched the tail of the tiger. Because from some of the feedback we get from the show, what we typically hear is that EdTech is not as equitable as, it is touted to be in the public space. And that EdTech is an elitist mentality or an elitist approach to education, because people tell you, oh, there's no technology, oh, there are no devices, there's no manpower, people do not understand how to use it. So in the context of, deleting, let me use your own word, deleting whatever barriers, it would be, do we have inclusivity in the actual sense in EdTech in Nigeria? Is it affordable? Is it accessible? Are people who are building thinking that they need a child, a girl who has been sent out of school, because she's a girl, or whose dad thinks she's better, on the farm frying gari, or, a girl who had to drop out from school because she had some issues and she had to give birth at 18 years. Or you have a child who cannot afford to pay for subscription for a premium service, but there's a smartphone in the family, but they don't believe, this is for us. Are we truly building inclusive EdTech in Nigeria?
I think the straightforward answer to that is no. Right? And that's a tough one to say. But I believe that we are making effort and we are in that direction already. This conversation is an evidence of that, right? It shows that there's that sensitization, there is awareness, right? And that's a good place to start. There are also individuals, innovators, co-founders who are already making this effort in their local places. However, we have to also break down what this inclusion really means based on the things you talked about. For an example, we still have young girls who are exposed to early marriage.
Yes.
Right. Now, we also have young boys that are involved in domestic labor, cheap labor.
Yes.
Right. And these people, for some reason, they are not even in a classroom.
Yes.
They are not exposed to learning, formal education. Now, if you look further into how challenging that could be, there are people who exist at the intersectionality of this kind of challenges. Let me break it down. A young girl that has social, economic constraints and has a disability. Now, these are three things. The fact that she's a young girl, she's already exposed to maybe early marriage. She has some religious constraints that prevent her from doing certain things. She lives in a rural environment where they don't have access to internet. She's not also going to school. She does not have a digital footprint. And then she has a disability. So that's four things. So if you think about that kind of complexity, there are thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people who live with such a reality across the country, across the continent. There's also that idea that inclusion just has to do with access, providing people with computers, providing them with internet. But beyond that, inclusion has to do with engagement. It has to do with support, right? Are we providing support for these people and not just throwing devices and solutions at them, which they might not even be using, or if they are using them, they are not using them optimally, right? Are we providing that education to the community that they should not stigmatize people who have this kind of limitations or challenges? So that's why I said that, yes, we are headed in the right direction, but I think there's still a lot of work that we need to do from different angles.
I really appreciate this picture you've painted right now, Babatunde, because you have done what I believe a lot of people who talk about inclusion haven't yet done. And you are thinking about it with the possible variations, and even combinations that it could exist when you're discussing inclusion and accessibility. I like that perfect picture you painted of, that learner, that girl who isn't going to school, has been exposed to, early marriage, there's the cultural bit of things, and even has, maybe a physical disability that hinders her, going into school or getting education, but she still needs to get some bit of education because this child, this girl is going to have children and needs to support them as well. We just have an endless cycle of, illiterates, not trained people, right? So we need learning, we need education to get to them where they are, where she is. And that's the question now. Our EdTech isn't doing that, or is it doing that? And I like to bring back a conversation we had, 2 months ago, where we were thinking about the role of NGOs, CSOs, and CBOs in pushing, for EdTech adoption. Do you think that there are more things? Because you have brought it down to the very granular, minute bits of things. Do you think there's a role that this type of community-based organizations need to play in helping the EdTech organizations who are building see what the complexities are and help them design the right kinds of solutions, or even the right kind of models, business models that would maybe give them partnerships that would get them access to this girl that you just, described?
Beautiful. And that's very possible. Grassroots organizations, people who have nonprofits, NGOs, CSOs that work in rural areas or maybe places where they have some kind of challenges. It could be connectivity, it could be related to power. They don't have light, they don't have internet access. But there are grassroots organizations in those places. Now, they can help with information gathering, right? Because they can also help with understanding the cultural nuances that really affect those people. And what I mean by that is there are language barriers, right? Many times when we build solutions or when people build solutions, they'll build a solution that is maybe for English users. But there are people in those rural areas who have not had an opportunity to learn how to speak or write in English. Local organizations that have that presence can help with interpretation, can help with data gathering, and they can also help with testing. But one of the ways that they can help with testing is getting them involved even in the design and the development process of those solutions, right? I say something which I will keep saying. We must move from designing for to designing with. Designing for, you're building something from your ivory tower. You do not have a representation of the stakeholders in the design process. But what you want to do is to have a representation of those stakeholders. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about stakeholders much later. But if I could touch on that a little bit, you also have to look at parent associations, for example. So grassroots organizations play a very critical role in technology adoption, right? And they can also do the same even from the very early stage of the design thinking process. They feed you with the data, how the people are going to be impacted. They feed you with the data, how best it is to implement it. And they can even support when it comes to how you roll out the whole solution, right? So that scalability is one of the things that grassroots organizations can also support with.
Great. So now when we think about all of what you have mentioned, right? I was going to ask, before now, who are the most visible or underserved learners in Nigeria's education system now? And I'm asking this from the lens of disenfranchisement that EdTech could possibly bring. This is a very critical question because I know that you're a boots on the ground guy who is pushing for, the implementation of more EdTech initiatives in societies and communities in Nigeria. So you have, first-hand access, front row seats to adoption and barriers. So who are some of the most visible, underserved learners, easily overlooked as well, where we're thinking of EdTech in Nigeria?
Yeah, I think people who do not have a digital footprint would come to mind first. Many of the solutions that we build, right, we'll build them based on some data that we've picked off the internet, based on some of the things that we've heard from people. But there are individuals who have not even held a tablet before. They've never used a smartphone before, but they're also entitled to education, right? There are people who live in rural areas where they do not have light. So light is one problem. Internet connection is another problem. So that's one level of access. There are also individuals that are in internet displaced communities and camps, right? Those people, there might be some kind of effort to help them to get educated, to get them to learn. But it's easy to also not think about them when it comes to inclusive EdTech because you are also not getting enough data from that space. Now, when we go all the way, we can look at people who have physical disabilities, right? Physical disabilities in places whereby the minimum thing that is required of them is survival. Now, nobody is thinking about education. The parents are probably just focused on helping those individuals to live and survive to the next day. So for such, it's easy to not really think about them because that data does not exist fully on a digital standpoint. So we don't have the digital presence for them to gather such data. It's very easy to actually overlook these individuals. Now, when people build, a lot of people build stuff that would work in places like Lagos, that would work in Johannesburg, that would work, in different cities where you already have infrastructure that is set up, right? But there are also people who necessarily are within cities at the same time where they have access and they have connectivity, but these individuals do not have the support to be able to use those things, right? So for example, a lot of people would just believe that all I need to do if I have a child that has a learning disability is to put that person in a special school, buy them technology. But there's also the emotional angle that is also missing. They need support. They need to not be seen that they are different, because that's not what we want to do. We need to make sure that they're actually involved. So when we look at those kind of people as well, there's an assumption that because they have parents that care for them, they have schools that they can provide them technology, they are already looked after and we've been able to provide care to them. But in the real mix of adoption, utilization, transformation, and impact, those people are not genuinely being impacted by those solutions. So those are the kind of classes of people that can be easily overlooked when it comes to inclusive EdTech.
Thank you so much, Babatunde, for this. And when you mentioned the first thing, the people who do not have an existing digital footprint, I don't know if to whether to agree with you or not. Being that the typical way we design things in Nigeria is everybody is creating their own database from scratch. So you don't have super EdTech products where you can pull in data from somewhere to another bit. So this is just a thought, right? And who knows, I could get another guest next week who is a startup, innovator, a founder who could say, no, I listened last week and what Babatunde said is not very accurate. Maybe we design for people who do not have food. I'm just saying, with the way we design in Nigeria, generally, everybody is getting their data from scratch. You're asking what your mother's maiden name is. You're asking what your date of birth is. They're asking you everything. So it should actually be, if you don't have a digital footprint, I don't think that it should be a problem for you being onboarded. But don't answer me, please. Let's have this conversation away from now. So our listeners, this is a point for you to come in. Do you think that people who do not have digital footprints are an easily overlooked segment when it comes to inclusion in EdTech? Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? I'd love to hear from you. Send me an SMS or a WhatsApp message 0703-165-0809 or 0706-402-0742. I'd love to hear from you. Back to you now, Babatunde. How can we help EdTech solutions to create better solutions with marginalized learners in mind? And this is my final question, by the way.
Yeah, I think two things that can happen with that is getting the users or people that are going to be using this technology, whatever you've built, also getting them equipped with the necessary skills. I say to people that competence precedes confidence, right? If I'm a teacher, I've got 45 minutes in the classroom to teach, right? 45 minutes. And 45 minutes, I use 5 minutes for behavioral objectives. I don't want to use 20 minutes to start learning how that technology can help those students. It's going to distract them. So there's a need to actually help people who are also going to be adopters and users of this technology to learn how they're going to do it. So I'm very, very big on capacity development for educators, right? The other side, I think, is also important is helping people to be able to utilize the solutions before you begin to scale them. When you have the prototypes ready, when these things have been built and you've not really pushed them up for development or wide adoption, get representations from different areas who are just willing to just like test it. They're willing to, permit me to use the word, have the people be like guinea pigs, just for that experiment. We want to test this solution. I'll be very upfront about it. This is what we are trying to achieve. This is how we want to look at it. We'll only test it for a period of 1 month. Whatever data we get from that would help to improve. So you are doing that for your iterations. And by the time you have, and that's what the human-centered design model really is about, is having stakeholders who are going to use the solution involved at the beginning of the design process. So their feedback, their input is also very critical. The adoption plan puts them at the center. The change management plan puts them at the center. The sustainability plan puts them at the center. Yeah.
That is a lot. But thank you so much, Babatunde. You have hit the nail on the head on the right way we should be thinking when we want to design solutions for marginalized learners. If you're thinking about getting solutions to these people, you also have to think about the people who would support them and ensure that they can use it as well as the people who you're originally designing for, right? So thank you so much, Babatunde, for sharing your valuable insights and your experience with us on the show today.
Thank you so much, and it's a great privilege to be here.
Thank you. And to you, our listeners, I would love to hear from you. My first question, do you agree with what Babatunde said, that learners without digital footprints are an easily, frequently overlooked segment when we think about inclusive EdTech? Then when you think about inclusivity and accessibility in EdTech, what does that mean to you? What does inclusivity and accessibility for EdTech mean to you? Send us an SMS or a WhatsApp message on 0703 165 0809 or 0706 402 0742. Send us a message and we'll read it next week. And if you know anyone who has missed out on this first episode of this 5-part series we'll be having this month, do not worry. They can follow the conversation. They can listen to us on Spotify, EdTech Mondays Nigeria. Join the conversation. Send us your feedback. They can also watch on YouTube. It's at CC Hub Africa. Watch, drop your comment, ask your questions. They have a beautiful community in the comment section. We also have a very vibrant and active WhatsApp and Telegram channel. It's EdTech Mondays Nigeria. Do well to search for us on WhatsApp or Telegram and join the channels where we have beautiful animated conversation on technology. And I promise you that this month's conversation is going to pack a punch. We are going to bring people who are working at the intersection of accessibility and inclusivity for EdTech across different segments that you would not always think. Babatunde mentioned the girl today who is, how did you say it again? She is young, she married early, she has cultural barriers, and she has a physical, thing that is stopping her from going to school, but she still needs to learn. Next week, I promise you, we have a different segment that you will not be expecting, and the week after that, and the week after that. So if you do anything this week, this month, join the conversation. Do not miss any week's episode of the EdTech Mondays Nigeria show. Until I come your way, same time, same station, I remain your host, Chinyelu Akpa. Is bye for now.
It's time for EdTech Mondays, brought to you by MasterCard Foundation and CC Hub.